This is Likutei Halachos Yomi, a summary of the central thoughts of Rabbi Nosson of Breslov in his writing, his work about Shulchan Aruch, the Seder Hayom of the Jew, according to the deeper wisdom of Rabbi Nachman in connecting the Pnimius HaTorah to the halacha that we observe. We've reached the end of the last section of Hilchos Hashkamas HaBoker, the laws of rising, which discusses the ideas of waking up, Tikkun Chatzos, at midnight. And Rav Nosson has explained, we are now in chapters 10, 11, and 12, which concludes the section Hilchos Hashkamas HaBoker Hey. Rabbi Nosson has explained previously that waking up in the middle of the night was described in the Gemara Brachos as the time that the Kinor David, the beautiful songs of David HaMelech's harp, started with the wake-up call that came through the Ruach Tzefonis, the northern wind. Now, the northern wind is associated with travail and trouble. David HaMelech's response to things that are troubling, which is any form of galut, whether it's personal, national, or otherwise, is to create a nigun. As we explained previously, a nigun means to take the good points, the good sounds, the good notes, the positive conversation, the redeemable features of every human being, and return them to a state of connection to Hashem by strengthening their faith, and faith will result in prayer. So the midnight prayer is when it's the most difficult time to connect to Hashem, when it's a time of din, but there are tzaddikim called the Balei Koach who have the ability, even in that time, to reach Hashem and daven on the level that mitigates harsh judgments and brings punishment to the wicked. This was David HaMelech. And he also explains that although Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara says in Brachos, could not exactly tell when Chatzos was, he told Paro that the destruction of the firstborn would happen ki Chatzos halayla, sometime around midnight. But it was David HaMelech who knew precisely the moment of Chatzos, that moment of ultimate judgment, and was able to mitigate it through his tefillos, which of course have been captured in the book of Psalms and Tehillim, and as a treasure trove of tefillos for any sort of distress and danger for the Jewish people. But that is really most effective and is empowered by the ability to rise early in the morning and even after midnight, but to wake the dawn. And Rabbi Nosson explained that the idea of saying Kaddish on a parent's yahrzeit is because this renewal of the world, which is symbolized by the rising sun, that's the ideal time to daven, which is Hashkama, what we call davening B'nei Tzachama, as the sun appears, is the ideal time to daven, saying Shema just before sunrise and saying Shemona Esrei with sunrise. And that is the perfect time associated in Shulchan Aruch with davening. Why? Because that represents the renewal of the world, the end of a dark galus, the introduction of goodness, of faith, of warmth, of a warm connection with Hashem, of enlightenment, of das. Now, this idea of das is what Rav Nosson says is key to the concept of children and yahrzeit. When a person leaves over children in this world, which is a mitzvah imperative, then his das, meaning the knowledge of awareness of Hashem, the thinking that is associated with the ratzon, the will of Hashem, is perfected through his children. How? Because they continue to live his name and his life by davening for him, or giving tzedakah for him, and particularly by reciting Kaddish for them, especially on the yahrzeit, because as Rav Nosson explains, the yahrzeit is a year cycle, and that also is a time of renewal. That also is a time of Rosh Hashanah. So for a particular neshama, their yahrzeit is a renewal of their neshama, and therefore the children must say Kaddish, because what they're doing is they're helping that soul reach even higher levels of connection and awareness to Hashem. It's critical because they cannot rest on what the state of the soul was in the previous year. The soul must continue to climb rung by rung higher in Olam Haba, and that is the purpose of davening and tzedakah on the yahrzeit, very much like we experience every single day. It's not surprising that, coming to Shachris and saying Kaddish for a parent are things that go together, because essentially, according to Rav Nosson, they're the same concept. Also, in addition to that, he says something truly amazing, that the Gemara in Brachos Tesbaz says on the following statement, Kol hanifna, anyone who cleanses themselves, uses the facilities, notel yada, washes his hands, meiniach tefillin, puts on tefillin, V'kora kriyashma and davens umispalo ki'ilu kibel ol malchus shamayim shlema. This is the ultimate acceptance of the divine will. So he interprets this as follows: not just expelling waste, but actually expelling the behaviors that are not necessary for health and wellness. In other words, overeating, overdrinking, indulging in pleasures that are not essential for good health and fitness. That's all called motarot. Even money that's not really needed for or directed towards holy purposes and being wasted on various things, that's also called motarot. Things that need to be expelled. And when you're notel Yadav is connected to Emunah. As we said, the Moshe's hands were Emunah, and the Yad of Yaakov holds the Akev of Esav, which is, he's known as Yadayim de Esav. And the idea of hands is the implementation of faithful works. And now the tefillin is that level of inner wisdom and knowledge. Again, it symbolizes, literally, it's put on the head, and that's literally what it symbolizes, both the hands and the head. And I have in front of me a chart that shows, based on Maseches Midos, the Mishnayos, the form of the Beit HaMikdash Sheni, which will be largely replicated in Beit Shlishi. And I can tell you that it looks exactly like a pair of tefillin. If you turn it and it's towards the west, on the west-east axis, the inner chamber is the Aron Kodesh, and then outer you have the menorah, you have the shulchan. It's all boxed into literally what looks like an identical tefillin box. It's the symbol of Hashem awareness and being aligned with the Ratzon Hashem, which is exactly what the Koach of Tumah does not want. And by waking early, we charge our potential to rejuvenate the songs of David HaMelech, which will lead ultimately to the nigun that Mashiach will sing, to bring the good out of all people and prepare them for the ultimate redemption.